From the Youth Science Council, this is Good Question, a podcast about science in the UAE. I'm your host, Sada Shirbeji. A little about me, I work in research and experimental psychology in the American University of Sharjah. In this podcast, we speak with experts around the country to introduce listeners from all backgrounds and levels of expertise to a variety of areas in science. For our first episode, we interview someone who went from watching Cosmos on Netflix to establishing his own space observatory. His unique contribution to science illustrates the variety of ways we can engage with science regardless of our backgrounds. Thabet Al Qaissieh is the founder of Sadeem Observatory, the UAE's first privately owned astronomical observatory. Welcome to the show, Thabets.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
Can you start by introducing yourself and telling us a little about you and your background?
Yes, so I'm Thabet Al Qaissieh from Abu Dhabi, and I recently, a couple of years ago, started the Al Sadeem Observatory right outside Abu Dhabi. And prior to that, I worked in a few places here and there. I have a master's degree in political economy and undergrad in business administration. And thanks to YouTube and lots of documentaries, I had the courage to start an observatory.
Wow, that's interesting how you have a completely different background to what you're currently doing. Does that consume all of your time today?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, most of the time So what I usually say is during the day I'm running the family business, and at night I'm at the observatory. So lots of coffee and little sleep.
Do you do anything related to your degrees?
Apart from business administration and running the businesses, no.
What about your master's? So is that just out of intellectual curiosity?
Absolutely not. It was a job requirement back then. Yeah.
Political economy.
Yeah.
How so?
So I worked in a think tank, Emirati Center for Strategic Studies and Research.
Okay.
And
what did they do?
So a lot of political, economic sort of research and analysis, and I figured, getting a master's in something related to my job would help. But the observatory came along and sort of took me away from that field. It's good to have a master's, obviously, but no, I prefer doing this.
Okay. So could you describe the observatory? What is it like? What does it look like for people who haven't seen it before or haven't gone there before? What do they expect? Just thinking about an observatory, what should they expect to see or find there?
So the vast majority of first-time visitors that come to the observatory expect a couple of telescopes, and that's about it.
Okay.
But that's definitely not the case. We have a 5.5 meter dome, which rotates 360.
Why does it rotate?
So it rotates because it as the telescope moves throughout the night.
Okay.
The dome has to rotate where the shutter is.
Okay.
And
what is a shutter? So I'm going to ask you some really silly questions here.
No,
but
not at all.
These are really good introductory questions for someone like me who doesn't know this, and as well as the audience.
Please feel free.
Okay.
So the dome. The idea of a dome is a dome that's covered all along, and all around the telescope,
okay,
with the exception of a small sort of window, which we call a shutter, that opens when the telescope is in operation. And the idea behind it is to block as much of the ambient light as possible, with the exception of the opening or the shutter. And a lot of times when we image using the main telescope...
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but where does the ambient light come from?
So we're about 30-40 minutes outside Abu Dhabi. So that's where most of the ambient light comes from. Okay. Now, when you would think, 30-40 minutes, it's not that far away, but it gets reflected off a lot of the atmosphere, where there's any fog or even low-hanging clouds.
Right.
So that also affects. So that's what the shutter is for. And as we image throughout the whole night, the telescope obviously is moving to track whatever object we're imaging. And as the telescope moves, the dome has to move along with it to keep it within the shutter opening.
Right. Interesting. What sort of things then do you image?
From black holes to planets to a lot of nebulae. That's what we mostly image. Every once in a while, we also image. We imaged not too long ago a supernova, which was sounds much more interesting than it really is when you look at the images.
Okay.
But for the specialists, it says an entire story.
Okay. And are these for research purposes, or are they for fun, or what is it exactly that?
Both.
Okay.
Both. So a lot of the black hole stuff that we're imaging. So right now, we're imaging a black hole system for NYUAD, and we are also imaging exoplanet transits, which is basically planets that are, well, this particular planet is, I think, around 40 light years away, and we image it for an extended amount of time, 3-4 hours at a time. And so what we are imaging actually is the host star of that system.
Mm-hmm.
And after a series of images, we run it through a program, and the program gives us a graph, a light graph. And if there's a dip in the graph, that means there was a transit, a planet from that system crossed across the star. So these are the two research projects that we're working on, and the other stuff is for fun, but also for building our own sort of catalog of objects that we imaged from the observatory.
Okay. So that, when you're saying image, you're taking a picture of this and then you're putting it in your records. Is that what's going on?
More or less, with a lot of hours in between. but yeah, generally, yeah.
Why a lot of hours? Is it just kind of a snapshot of the
No.
It's
okay. So usually when any of the images we take, it's about 2 to 4 hours of imaging.
So is it taking images
one after after the other? So the last image we put out, for example, the last image, which is, I think, one of the prettiest images we took, is the Eagle Nebula, which is a gorgeous nebula that's about 6,000 light years away. We spent, for this particular image, we spent about 4 nights imaging, 2 hours each night. And each sort of frame or snapshot was about, I think, 3 minutes. So we take in different filters, of course, to pick up the different light waves, etc. And when we finished the imaging, we run it through a software that stacks it or sort of combines the images together to get as much detail as possible, with the colors, of course, the contrasts, and all the small details of the nebulosity.
Okay, interesting. And so when you say we took an image, or we're taking images of black hole, what does that mean? Where do you even point at for you to, look at the black hole or observe the black hole?
Luckily for us, we have NYUAD professors and
Okay.
researchers to tell us where to point.
Okay.
Because, for me, as someone that hasn't studied, astronomy or astrophysics, the images looked like a black and white image of stars.
Oh, really? Okay.
So I have no sort of understanding of what that image means.
Okay, right.
But they gave us the coordinates. They gave us, what needs to be sort of there when we image, and we send them the images, and that's where all the sort of the dissecting happens with the
experts.
With the experts. Yeah.
Okay.
But when from what we've heard, the quality of the images were good. So that's good.
Is that because of how sophisticated these telescopes are?
Well, so telescopes are not that sophisticated.
Okay.
In general.
But the ones that you have?
No, not really.
Okay.
Not really. They're not sort of, they're not the top of the line in the market. They're not anything fancy. We just, we just, so with imaging, in terms of getting quality, you need to, know exactly where you're pointing. And after that, the second most important thing is the mount that's holding the telescope is able to track the object very precisely.
Mm-hmm.
So once that happens, the quality of the images turn out to be good. Also, the quality of the camera we have, that's probably the most sophisticated thing we have, is the camera that we image with. And that's where, sort of the magic happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How large are these telescopes? How many do you have?
I have about 7, 8. And we have the main one, which we do for mostly the research, is 16 inches, which is about 40 centimeter diameter.
Okay.
So that's the largest one we have.
Yeah.
That's the largest one we have.
Wow.
And then other telescopes that vary in size.
Okay. Right. And so for people who can visit, right? People can visit the observatory,
Yes,
correct?
absolutely.
What do they use?
So the main telescope, the 16-inch, the largest telescope we have, we only use for research purposes. So we don't use it all the time.
Okay.
Visitors will walk in, they'll see it, etc. But for the regular visitors, we have a 12-inch telescope, a 10-inch telescope, and an 8-inch telescope, and various other smaller telescopes that they can use as well. How we decide which telescope to use will depend on what's visible that evening. So, for example, if the moon is visible, it's a full moon, for example, we're not going to use the 12-inch telescope because that's too sort of magnified for the moon. So we'd use something like an 8-inch telescope. So yeah, it'll depend on what's visible that evening.
Okay. So from my very limited experiences going, like stargazing with these equipment, when there is a full moon, it's usually at the expense of looking at the stars, correct?
Absolutely.
And it's interesting because, when I personally went, I was expecting that, they were going to attach these equipment, they were going to put these equipment together, and then I was going to start seeing some planets, and it was just going to be extremely clear. But then they were kind of like tiny dots, and, it's kind of vague image, and it's not as, exactly I expect. But then when you actually start looking through and you see the actual dot, and you see, for example, the moons of Jupiter.
Yeah.
It's just utterly fascinating,
yeah, it
right?
is.
But it's not the process that you expect. Is it like that at the observatory, or do you have some means of, making the images look much more clear so that people know exactly what they're looking at? Is there also a guide that helps them, know what to see?
So we have a full-time astronomer over there, and he does a lot of the explanations and the tours and all that for the guests. But generally speaking, and this happens to me a lot when there's a planet visible and a bright nebula visible at the same time. And I showed them, for example, Jupiter. We know Jupiter is the largest planet in the solar system. But when they look at Jupiter from the telescope, their first reaction is, that's it?
Yeah.
But, it's over 1 billion kilometers away, first of all.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And then they compare it with a nebula, and they'll be like, well, a nebula is 1,000 light years away. Why is it clearer?
Okay.
And it's very simple, because a nebula's size is usually light years across.
Okay.
Light years across.
Okay.
So if we talk about Orion Nebula, for example, which is sort of the closest nebula to the solar system, it's around 1,500 light years away with a diameter of, I think, if I remember correctly, 7 or 8 light years.
Okay.
In 7 or 8 light years, that's, it's huge.
Okay.
It's huge.
To a listener, how would you describe what a nebula is? From the way you understand it as well.
It's just the prettiest clouds you'll ever see. That's
Okay.
that's the only way I can.
Okay.
Well, because a nebula is basically, whatever is left over from a dying star,
Okay.
right? And it comes in all shapes and sizes and colors.
Mm-hmm.
So Orion Nebula, for example, is reddish, whitish, and some blue as well.
Mm.
And you aim at another part of the sky, let's say the Rosette Nebula, which literally looks like a rose and is red. So that's it's basically interstellar cloud,
Okay. Right.
or superheated cloud.
Okay. Interesting. And so, what are some of the most fascinating things you've seen through your telescopes in your observatory?
Hmm. The first time I used the telescope, very first time, when the idea of the observatory came about, was seeing Saturn's rings for the
Okay.
first time,
Yeah.
and that was out of this world,
Yeah.
literally.
Literally.
And it's one of the most amazing sights. I'll never forget.
Yeah.
And then, as I went along and I started getting into astrophotography and all that, that changes perspective of the night sky. You can, aim pretty much, at a lot of parts of the sky, and there's some sort of nebulosity, some sort of clouds and color that are there.
Mm.
And going back to the full moon, that's the worst period for us because we can't do any imaging.
Interesting. Okay. So, do you see yourself getting a degree in this eventually, or learning some of the more specialist stuff related to this eventually? Or are you just gonna, you're gonna stay in this area because it does provide that kind of fulfillment to you?
I would love to get a degree,
Yeah.
even if it's an online degree,
Yeah.
but knowing how I was with math back in university,
Oh, really?
there's no way I'm doing a degree. No
Okay.
way.
I see. Okay.
I mean, I want to learn more, and that's why I watch a lot of YouTube and documentaries and
Mhm.
and all that stuff. And whenever I meet the professors from NYU, I always bug them with questions,
Okay. Yeah.
just so I can understand
Yeah.
some more. But a degree, probably not.
Okay. Fair enough. And okay, so going back to the very beginning, why an observatory?
So the observatory right now is on sort of land we have in that area,
Hmm.
Al-Wathba. And one evening, I was sitting by myself by the fire and noticed a ton of stars. And I said, I want to buy a telescope. I don't know where to buy a telescope, how to use it.
Okay.
So I went to Google. I searched
Okay.
for I remember putting Abu Dhabi telescopes, just anything that can point me in the right direction.
Yeah.
And I found this group on Facebook, amateur group. They get together every once in a while,
Hmm.
and they go off to do some stargazing. And the founder of the group, I contacted the founder of the group, and I asked him if we can go have coffee because I want to ask him some questions on telescopes.
Hmm.
He was kind enough to meet, and we agreed to send me some telescopes that I can buy. And he asked if he can go to my place in the farm, and use his telescope. So I told him, just watch out for the sand because there's a lot of sand over there. Apart from that, feel free. So he goes, and 2 days later, he sends me. He was like, yeah, sends me an email and asks, "Why don't we start an observatory?" And I thought he was insane. It's not the usual sort of idea that would come to anybody. So I said, let's meet again. Let's talk about it and all that. And we met. He told me about, at that point, I think this UAE Space Agency was maybe 6-8 months after inception. So so the momentum from sort of a high level was there, but you never, I didn't know how it was on sort of average person's level. Um, I told him to send me some financials, at least a plan, so I can, going back to my sort of my business mentality.
Mm-hmm.
And he did, and I looked at it, and I had a business back then which I sold, so I had the funds, but it was still a crazy idea. Um, it started getting clearer the more I read about the observatory and what we can do and how it can benefit, so on. And then one day I was talking to my late brother Mansour, and I told him, "Listen, this idea came to my desk. What do you think of it?" And he said, "Thabets, it's very simple. If it works, great, good for you, good for the community. If it doesn't work, you have a cool place to hang out."
Okay.
And I said, "Well, fair enough." And that's how we started working on the plan of the observatory.
Wow.
Yeah, this was towards April 2015. Yeah,
Wow. Right.
yep. By
Not
the
where,
time,
not probably not where you expected your life to kind of
absolutely not,
begin.
absolutely not,
Yeah.
absolutely not.
Yeah.
No, no, no. I mean, I was into astronomy, stargazing, not even astronomy. Um, but I did not expect to be where I am today.
Okay.
Uh,
That's interesting. Right. So, you know, going back to the people that come to this observatory, what kind of audience does this attract? Who are the people who end up coming to look at the stars?
it's a mix.
Okay.
It's really it's a mix from you know um, couples that want to do something different, to families, to parents that want their younger kids to learn something new about science in general and astronomy specifically. Obviously, we get a lot of university students who are either studying astrophysics or astronomy. So it's a wide variety of people. The most interesting ones for me are the transit passengers in Abu Dhabi Airport, who are in Abu Dhabi Airport for 8-10 hours,
Okay.
and it happens to be nighttime when they arrive at Abu Dhabi Airport. So they come over for a couple of hours, use the telescope, and then go back to the airport.
That's so funny. Who tells them about this?
Google. They all found this on Google, and
Wow.
that's why it's interesting for me, because it tells me that the name is out there.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why it's interesting to me.
Okay. Wow. And how do kids usually respond when they're seeing the stars for the first time, or looking at
Uh,
the sky in such a perspective for the first
that
time?
yeah, that's always funny. It's
Y-
always there's
Yeah.
always a funny comment.
Oh,
And it's
really?
always a funny
You must
comment.
really love their wonder. Yeah.
Well, everybody would, anybody would,
Yeah.
because I was. So the first time I ever looked at the telescope, the very first time I even saw a telescope,
Yeah.
I was probably 9 or 10 years old in San Diego, California, with the family,
Okay.
and we went to the science museum, and they had it's indoors. It was daytime, and they had a telescope over
Yeah.
there, and
Okay.
the sign said, "See Mars up close." And I got all excited. I looked through the telescope, fake picture of Mars, or a picture of Mars, and I thought it was one of the most amazing things in my life. Now this was what 1991.
Okay, but why? Why
When
did it stimulate that kind of response in you, do you
Well,
think?
because it's the only thing that's sort of not from Earth that I can look at.
Okay.
It's again, pun intended. I guess it's out of this world.
Yeah.
It's out of this world. So when a kid actually sees a planet
Yeah.
or the moon,
Yeah.
it will blow them away. And the two funniest comments I heard with kids, one of them when she first saw the moon, her first comment was, "Oh, it does look like cheese." That was the funniest one. And then another kid, when he first saw Jupiter, he was so excited. And I said, "Why are you so excited?" It was a bit unusual. He goes like, "Because We took it in class, and I know the teacher didn't see Jupiter like I did.
Oh, wow.
I'm like, good for you, kid.
It's amazing.
So yeah, I mean, yeah, it's pretty nice. It's pretty nice, and it's at the end of the day, it's a very good astronomy. I guess is probably the easiest way to get kids hooked on to science, because even I'm 37, and even when I was a kid, my dream was to become an astronaut. I can't imagine kids right now. They're probably dreaming of being the first policeman on Mars.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
they're going that far.
Yeah.
So for them to see a planet, a nebula, the moon through a telescope, it sticks in their heads, and sort of we hope it encourages them to sort of get into sciences.
Okay. Why is it important to you that they get into astronomy?
Not sciences, in general.
Yeah.
Well, because of the impact on society, on the economy, on a lot of factors. NASA has this wonderful website where it lays down everything that was invented, or everything we use today, that was a result of space exploration. And it will be the silliest thing, like, if I remember, like the GPS. GPS. If it wasn't for space exploration, we probably won't have GPS.
Okay.
And a lot of other things. For a country like the UAE, where we have the universities, we have the people, we have the financial means.
Yeah.
We just need something to sort of build on.
Yeah.
And then we can start finding solutions through science, whether it's astronomy, biology, whatever field of science. We can find solutions to problems that are more relatable to us at home.
Okay.
Yesterday there was an article about how 70% of energy consumption in the UAE in the summer goes to the ACs, and that's something you can't really change, because our weather is not the best. But when we have local know-how that understands the challenges, then you can start coming up with solutions to those challenges. But you need a population that is sort of science literate.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I understand. So from your experience speaking to people about your observatory and talking to them about what sort of things you do there, how do they usually react? Just generally, this general population, when you talk to your friends about there, or people you meet for the first time and you tell them that's what you do, what's usually their reaction?
A lot of people, they're impressed, they're happy, etc.
Okay.
Some people think I just did it because I was bored and I had a few extra dirhams here and there, and I decided to do it.
And that's not true, to be clear.
Absolutely not. Okay. Absolutely, I wouldn't be here. Right. I wouldn't be here. And that's that's one of the sort of challenges I face on a personal level.
Yeah.
With a lot of people. But one thing, a lot of recently I started posting a lot of the images I take on Reddit UAE and Reddit Abu Dhabi.
Okay.
And people, we had 2 or 3 weeks ago was the first, maybe a little bit more, a month ago, the first post. We already had 4 or 5 people email us to visit the observatory just from the Reddit posts.
Nice.
And the interest is there. The interest is there because okay, you can go to a restaurant, the malls are nice, but how it becomes repetitive for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And what people want to do, they want to do something new, whatever it is.
Okay.
So you have those kind of people as well that are really into it because of that factor.
Yeah. Okay. It's a unique experience.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. It is. And going back to the transit passengers, a lot of them. We had the Swiss no, he was an astronomer. He wasn't an astrophysicist. He was a Swiss astronomer that works at a professional observatory in Switzerland.
Yeah.
Forgot which institute, but same thing. He was transit. He was going to Australia, I think, and he had layover in Abu Dhabi airport. He contacted us. He came. He was happy, impressed, etc. And for me, it was very strange. You work at a professional observatory with a much larger telescope, much more sophisticated equipment. Why would you want to come to this observatory?
Yeah.
And his response was very, very brief and straightforward. He goes like, "I just wanted to see the sky the same way the Arab astronomers saw it."
Okay.
And I'm like, wow, I didn't even think of that.
Yeah.
I didn't even think of that.
Interesting.
Yeah. So for every person, they have their own sort of story on why they want to stargaze.
Okay. Yeah. At the mention of Arab astronomers, it's interesting because, we have this history, of course. I'm sure you know this, like we have this history with astronomy and this, the names of the stars, largely Arab, and the astrolabe, of course. I mean, I just know some of the basic historical facts about this. Do you think it relates to your identity or the identity of this culture, particularly because I can imagine how people who, desert dwellers, people who live in the desert, would want to use, of course, would use the sky in order to navigate. So, I mean, we have this this cultural relation to astronomy, and then we have this historical relation to astronomy. So how do you think this relates to your identity and the identity of your culture, with respect to this area, science?
So before I started the observatory, none of this meant anything to me.
Okay.
Because I wasn't, I didn't understand it.
Yeah.
But the more I read into it, the more you started seeing, it was as important as water.
Okay.
For this part of the world.
Okay.
Because water is everything. Water is life. It was scarce in this part of the world. So the Bedouins and the people that sort of lived in this area moved around following water.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't be able to follow the water without the stars.
Okay.
So the connection with the stars was much more than just, I'm going south or I'm going east, or the big misconception that the only reason they use the stars is to know where the Qibla is. And I've heard that a lot. But that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
That wasn't the case. And earlier this end of last summer, around August 20th, I believe, I got a phone call from I forgot which department of the Presidential Affairs, the Ministry of Presidential Affairs, asking if we can observe Sohail, which is sort of the star that signifies the end of summer.
All right.
And the beginning of the sort of the weather changing.
Okay.
And when somebody, again, I don't remember which department, but it's a pretty important entity for them to know when Sohail is.
Okay.
And what that tells me is it's still an important sort of object to observe.
Okay.
So you have that on one level, something as recent as today, going back to 100 years ago.
Okay.
I mean, not even before. Then there's another layer to it. Going hundreds and hundreds. Over 500, 1,000 years ago. A lot of the calculations on where the movement of the planets, the movement of the stars, the movement of Earth itself was done through calculation of observing these objects in the sky, and that's where a lot of the naming and the discoveries or theories that came from sort of the golden era of Islamic civilization.
Yeah.
Then going one layer above that, or actually below that, because it's sort of we're building on their discoveries.
Yeah.
Is all the ancient civilizations before that.
Yeah.
I forgot which star, but a lot of the Egyptian, the ancient Egyptians.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I forgot. I think Spica, one of the stars that sort of rise towards the southern part of the sky,
Okay.
signified to them that the flooding of the Nile is approaching.
Okay.
And so that's when they can do their harvesting and not harvesting, seeding of
Yeah.
the ground. So when it floods, it can sort of irrigate the agriculture.
Yeah.
The Mayans, the Europeans, the ancient Romans, ancient Greeks, the Chinese, the Far East Asian, the Indian civilizations,
Okay.
all those civilizations, even Australia, the Aboriginals, all these civilizations relied on the sky, whether it's the sun or the night sky,
Okay.
or both.
Okay.
And that's a common sort of factor between a lot of all civilizations.
Yeah.
And that's something we try to highlight in a lot of our open house events at the observatory.
Yeah.
That it's something we're connected to.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
the Arabs named the stars, but we named the stars that were part of constellations named by the ancient Greeks.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's building on top of sort of the achievements of others.
Yeah.
Of course, with giving them the credit and all that. More importantly, it's what sort of
unifies.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it, from your experience, it doesn't seem that it's fresh in people's minds today, right? This realization that we're connected to this history of astronomy, right?
Absolutely.
It's not a salient topic in people's
they know
minds.
Generally, they know that, we named a couple of stars in the sky.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's it.
Yeah.
With in many ways, it's a very contradictory sort of statement for a lot of people to say, for sort of more complicated reasons.
Yeah.
But no, it's I mean, a couple of years ago, I was one of those people.
Yeah.
And what we try to do also at the observatory, we try to sort of revive that. We try to highlight how a lot of the stuff that sort of we or the ancient Arabs discovered is in use till today. One of the most interesting things I recently found out, Sohail, the star,
signifies the end of summer.
Yeah, the signifying end of summer was a problematic star for the ancient Arabs, because there were a few bright stars around it, and they always mistaked Sohail with other stars. So within that constellation, there's Sohail and Nayr, Sohail, more, I think 3 or 4 Sohails.
Yeah.
And it was a very confusing sort of, process to pinpoint Sohail. There are poems about how complicated Sohail is. There are, essays, etc. And it was only until 2016.
Yeah.
2016.
Right.
That the International Astronomical Union designated an official name for the proper Sohail. And they gave it Cannabis.
Cannabis?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And what's interesting about that is in every shuttle that's been to space, there's a Cannabis camera on board, and the only function for this camera is to track Cannabis as it moves. It orbits around the Earth, and yeah, so that shows the significance of that star, which was significant for a lot of the Arabs, and specifically Arabs in the Arabian Peninsula, sort of the southern part of the Arabian Peninsula specifically, because it's not really visible in other parts of Arabia.
Okay. Well, before we relate
this to some of the activities going on here in the UAE, I just want to note and, ask you this as well. Something I've experienced before while looking at the sky. It's a really strange kind of cliche experience, but uh, you know, just gazing up, it makes me feel really uncomfortable, to be honest.
Uncomfortable?
It makes me feel really uncomfortable. It just makes me feel anxious and really
Really?
uncomfortable. Just the vastness and this notion that, obviously really cliche, but the fact that we're just so small in comparison to this, I can't even conceive of just how big it is, right? It makes me feel anxious and uncomfortable and just gives me this just awe simultaneously. It's just kind of mixture. It's a really overwhelming experience. And I never thought that something like it's always there. It's always present. And yet anytime you take just you make the deliberate effort to just contemplate it or look at it or gaze at it, it imbues you with this awe, So it's something that exists and it's always there with you. And just when you take some time to look at it, it makes you feel so overwhelmed. Do you share that experience or is it just me?
I absolutely do. It
Yeah.
doesn't get me anxious as
Yeah.
much as it gets me excited.
Okay.
I get really excited, and then I get depressed because I can't go up over there. But I think one of the most amazing quotes, which I don't remember word for word.
Paraphrase.
Yeah, I'll paraphrase it. By Carl Sagan is basically the elements in our bodies can be traced back to dying stars, and that's where his famous quote, "We're made of star stuff," comes from. And for me, that was one of the most amazing sort of quotes to hear, because it's and of course it's the way he says it. It's the way that Carl Sagan says it. Makes it very.
He has this famous documentary, right? Cosmos.
It's the best. It's the best.
This famous video on YouTube about the blue dot, right?
Pale blue dot, yeah.
Blue dot,
Pale blue dot.
It's a really phenomenal video.
Yeah.
So for our listeners, if you want to check it out,
you have to.
Carl Sagan, Pale blue dot. Yeah.
It's one of my motivational videos.
Okay.
That when I'm feeling a bit under the weather, I just listen to that specific video. But yeah, it's it puts things a lot of times, but the vastness of the universe for me puts things a lot of things in perspective.
Yeah.
As humans, we tend to think that everything revolves around us as a species.
Yeah. Turns out everything revolves around the sun.
And then the sun is revolving around something else. Maybe a massive black hole in the center of our Milky Way galaxy.
Yeah. Right. Of course. Yeah. Okay. So, how does this observatory play a role in the UAE space vision, in your opinion?
The first time I met with the people at the space agency, my message to them, and I get a lot of support from them for everything we do, really, was my role is to make sure there's enough interest with students to pursue a degree in science, preferably in astronomy or astrophysics. But in science. And because astronomy is sort of the hook to that, and with the one thing with sort of studying the cosmos in general, it encompasses almost every discipline out there. And I always tell the guests at the observatory, if you're a nutritionist and you think you can't get involved in space exploration, watch The Martian. Because The Martian, the main character, Matt Damon's character, he's a botanist.
Yeah, he's a botanist. Yeah,
he's not a, he's never been away from his garden.
Yeah, served him well while he was stuck there.
It did, absolutely, absolutely. But that's the interesting part about the cosmos, or being, or exploring the cosmos. So we try to sort of create the momentum for people to consider pursuing a degree in any of the science fields out there.
Okay, right. So to follow up from that, for listeners who are interested in what you do and how you do it, what are some things you would recommend they look into?
Just look into whatever sort of attracts you. Because for me, I was always attracted to astronomy,
Okay.
stars, etc., and all that. And one of the hobbies I did was go on NASA websites and just scroll around all the images that I take right now.
Right.
Because I was interested in astronomy, but I never imagined where I am today.
Yeah.
Until you get that opportunity, and you never know when that opportunity will come.
Yeah.
But you won't know it if you don't expose yourself to sort of the general idea of it. So whatever it is, if biology is something you're interested in, get a microscope.
Okay.
Get a microscope.
Okay.
Get a leaf from the garden and look under the microscope.
Okay.
And you never know where that will take you.
Right.
One thing I realized in life, a lot of people who had the solid plan at the beginning never went through it.
Oh, really? Okay.
Never went through it. Because life is just life,
Yeah.
Sometimes an opportunity comes up, like with the observatory, and just took me into an entirely different direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for being present today and having this wonderful conversation with me.
Thank you for having me, and clear skies.
That was Thabet Al Qaissieh, Emirati entrepreneur, astronomy enthusiast, and owner of Al Sadeem Observatory. To listen to more episodes, you can find Good Question on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for what you'd like to see from us next, you can reach us at GoodQuestionUAE on Instagram and Twitter, or email us at info@goodquestion.ae. Good Question is a production of the Youth Science Council and the Office of Advanced Sciences in the United Arab Emirates. Produced and directed by Hind Al-Ali and Hayat Al-Hassan. Sound designed by Gareth Chen. Saad Al-Ali is our editor. Hamad Al-Mansouri is our digital media coordinator. And I'm Sada Shilbaji.